Hello, my name is Father Lawrence Jagfeld. I am a Franciscan friar of the Sacred Heart Province, and I am also the administrator of CUSA, an apostolate of persons with chronic illness and/or disability. Our liturgical year is waning. We have reached the 27th Sunday in ordinary time. There are but another 7 Sundays to go before we come to the end of this liturgical year. The first reading for this 27th Sunday comes to us from one of the classical prophets by the name of Habakkuk. Habakkuk utters a phrase that I have come to associate with these classical prophets. He asks God, "How long? How long before you come to save us? How long before you come and deal with the sinners? How long before you come and rescue us from our oppressors?" Mind you, Habakkuk has not lost faith. You can't ask the question, "How long?" if you are not a person of faith. If you didn't believe that the bus was eventually going to come as you stood on the corner, you wouldn't ask, "How long?" If you didn't believe that the postman was going to deliver your mail, eventually, you wouldn't ask, "How long?" This is a question of frustration. It is a question of a certain amount of distress, but it is not a question that puts faith in the background. And it is that issue of faith that Jesus addresses in the gospel today. The apostles said to Jesus, "Increase our faith." And Jesus replied, "If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you would say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you." Now, I think that we miss a little bit of the importance of that question or that request on the part of the disciples to increase their faith because we don't hear the verses immediately preceding it. Those verses are the very famous saying of Jesus, "If your brother sins against you 7 times in one day and comes to you 7 times and asks your mercy, you must forgive him 7 times. Who among us would not, when faced with that issue, say that we need more faith? Increase our faith. Most of us live by a saying that goes something like this: "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me." Once we have been hurt, once we have experienced somebody's dishonesty or somebody's abandonment, we set up all sorts of barriers so that we will not be in that vulnerable position again. And yet it is this very thing that Jesus asks of us. He asks us to forgive 7 times. And in another gospel, it's actually even greater, 7 times 7 times. This would indeed take a great deal of faith. That gospel reading is followed by a parable which we will hear this week, in which Jesus tells his disciples, servants do what they're supposed to do, not because they are going to get something from it, but because that's what servants do. And that's what we are. We are God's servants. We are not going to win heaven. We are not going to get into paradise simply because we do something. We are going to be saved by our faith. And it is that issue that Jesus is addressing here. Believe. He uses the example of a mustard seed, and he compares it to a mulberry tree or a mulberry bush. Actually, the Greek would be translated a little bit differently, a sycamine tree, which has an extensive root system and is very, very difficult to dislodge. But Jesus says that if you have the faith the size of a mustard seed, you would be able to tell that tree to uproot itself, plant itself in the sea, and it would do so. So this Sunday, we are asked to examine our faith. We are asked to examine it in terms of how much we are willing to do, how far we are willing to extend ourselves, how great is our sense of mercy and reconciliation. Our current Holy Father, Pope Francis, has been making a great deal of noise about forgiveness, about mercy, and about compassion. It seems as if this is going to be the hallmark of his preaching. He's calling people back to God's mercy. He's asking people to be forgiving. He's asking people to put aside their ancient grudges and to learn to live in peace. Indeed, that will take a great deal of faith. For more information about CUSA, please visit us at www.cuson.org or look us up on Facebook.